Welcome back to Mighty Habits, everyone. Today we are going deep, well, into love.
Yeah.
But not just the hearts and flowers kind of love. We're going way beyond the surface to explore the science behind romantic relationships. We'll be guided by Sue Johnson's book, Love Sense.
What's really interesting about Johnson's work is that she mixes hard science with really practical advice. It's not just about understanding the theories, it's about how to actually use them to build better and stronger relationships.
Yeah, and she really throws down the gauntlet with that subtitle, The Revolutionary New Science of Romantic Relationships. It makes you wonder what's so revolutionary about it.
Yeah.
I mean, haven't we been trying to figure out love for like centuries?
Exactly. And that's really where Johnson's work stands out. You see, traditional relationship advice, it often focuses on communication skills or conflict resolution. It's almost like putting a Band-Aid on the problem. But Johnson argues that these approaches, well, they try to fix the symptoms, not the root cause.
Okay, so what is the root cause then, according to Johnson? Like, what's the real foundation of a healthy and lasting relationship?
She calls it emotional responsiveness. And you can think of it as like being really attuned to your partner's needs and their emotional signals, and responding in a way that makes them feel safe, understood, and cared for.
So it's not just about saying, I love you,
Yeah.
or buying flowers.
Right. It's more about consistently showing up for your partner in a way that really connects with them emotionally. Imagine you're having a hard day. Now, accessibility would be your partner putting their phone down and truly listening to you. Responsiveness would be them mirroring your emotions back to you. Maybe saying something like, wow, that sounds really frustrating. And engagement might be them offering to help solve the problem or just giving you a hug.
I love that. That's a great way to explain it. It's like, instead of just acknowledging the situation, you're actively stepping into your partner's world and letting them know that you get it.
Exactly. And Johnson argues that this constant emotional connection, it's like oxygen for a relationship. It's what lets it breathe and grow and thrive.
It makes me think about how we all crave that feeling of
Yeah.
being seen and heard, not just in romantic relationships, but in all our relationships.
Absolutely. That need for secure attachment and emotional responsiveness, it seems to be a universal human experience. But here's the really cool part. The ways those needs are expressed and met can be totally different depending on the culture.
That's so true.
Yeah.
I was looking at where Love Sense is available.
Yeah.
And it's literally everywhere, from Argentina to Australia, Canada to China. It makes you wonder if these principles really translate across different cultures, with all their different norms and expectations.
It's a question that Johnson dives into. And what's interesting is that while the basic need for connection seems to be universal, the language of love can be totally different. For example, some cultures might show love with big gestures, while others value subtle expressions of affection.
So it's like the melody of love might sound different, depending on where you are in the world, but the underlying rhythm of connection is still the same.
You got it. And that's where things get really interesting. It's not just about speaking your own love language. It's about learning to understand your partner's language, too.
That's such a nice way to put it. It's like becoming fluent in the language of your partner's heart.
And that fluency takes work, It requires us to get out of our comfort zones, be curious about our partner's emotional world, and be willing to adapt our own communication style.
So we're talking about emotional responsiveness as the bedrock of a strong relationship. And we're also seeing how this can look different across cultures, even though that core need for connection is universal.
You got it. And that's just scratching the surface. Johnson goes deep into how this revolutionary understanding of love can transform how we approach our relationships. And that's what we'll keep exploring in this deep dive.
All right, listeners, buckle up. We're just getting started, and you won't want to miss what's coming next.
So how can we actually use these ideas to be better partners?
Yeah, because let's be real, we all need a little help sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Relationships can be amazing, but they can also be a lot of work. And what I love about Johnson's approach is that it feels really empowering. She's not just telling us what to do. She's giving us the tools to actually understand how love works and use that knowledge to build the relationships we want.
Exactly. It's like she's giving us a map and showing us the terrain, the potential dangers, and how to navigate them successfully.
Okay, so speaking of navigation, I'm curious about the practical side of this. Like, does Johnson actually give us concrete strategies to become more emotionally responsive? Because honestly, sometimes I feel like I'm speaking a totally different language than my partner.
She does, and this is where Love Sense gets really practical. She introduces this concept called ARE, which stands for accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement.
Okay, break that down for me. What do those three elements actually look like in a relationship?
Well, accessibility is about being present for your partner, both physically and emotionally, like putting your phone down when they're talking to you and really listening to what they have to say. Responsiveness is about tuning into their emotions and reflecting those emotions back to them. So saying things like, I can see that you're really hurting right now, or wow, you must be so excited about that. And then engagement is about actively participating in your partner's life, showing real interest in their world, and creating shared experiences together.
So it's not just about grand gestures
Mm,
or saying all the right things. It's about those small but powerful ways we show up for each other every day.
you got it. It's about making emotional responsiveness a part of your daily life. Johnson even suggests this exercise called taking emotional temperature readings, where you and your partner check in with each other throughout the day about how you're feeling and what's going on for you emotionally.
I love that. It's like taking the pulse of your relationship, way more insightful than just asking, how was your day?
Right. It's about going deeper and creating that shared emotional awareness that really strengthens your bond. And you know what's even more interesting? Johnson also talks about the importance of vulnerability and how couples should embrace their imperfections and let themselves be seen for who they really are.
Okay, I'm all for being authentic, but letting someone see your vulnerabilities? That can be scary. What if they reject you?
I get it. It does take courage to be vulnerable. But here's the thing. When we let ourselves be truly seen, we create space for a much deeper level of intimacy and connection. We're basically saying to our partner, I trust you enough to let you see the real me. And that builds an incredible bond.
That reminds me of that Brene Brown quote, vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen
Yeah.
when we have no control over the outcome.
Exactly. It's about embracing that uncertainty and trusting that your partner will meet you with love and acceptance. Which brings us to another important part of Johnson's approach, the importance of repair.
Yeah, because even in the most loving relationships, we're going to mess up sometimes. We're going to hurt each other, say the wrong thing, or make a mistake.
Of course. And that's where repair comes in. It's about acknowledging the hurt, taking responsibility for our actions, and expressing real remorse. It's also about being willing to forgive and move forward together.
So it's not about avoiding conflict or pretending everything's perfect. It's about creating that culture of empathy and understanding where you can work through those challenges together.
You got it. It's about recognizing that we're all human. We all make mistakes. And the important thing is to have each other's backs and be there for each other.
You know what I really love about all of this?
Mm.
Is that it feels so hopeful. It's like instead of just hoping for the best in our relationships, we're actually given the tools to create the love we want.
It's about going from passive to active and becoming conscious creators of our own love stories.
I love that. Speaking of love stories, I'm sure our listeners are curious
Mm.
about how all of this applies to their own lives. What are some key takeaways they can start using today?
Well, the first thing is to become aware of emotional responsiveness. Really pay attention to how you and your partner are showing up for each other emotionally. Are you really listening? Are you mirroring each other's feelings? Are you actively involved in each other's lives?
That's such a great starting point. It's like taking inventory of your emotional connection and seeing where you might need to make some changes. What else?
Don't be afraid to be vulnerable with each other. Share your fears, your dreams, your imperfections. Let yourselves be seen for who you really are. And when conflicts come up, as they always do, focus on repair. Acknowledge the hurt, take responsibility, express remorse, and work towards forgiveness.
This is all so valuable. Love Sense really gives us a roadmap to building stronger and more fulfilling relationships. But here's a question I've been thinking about. Is this just for romantic relationships? Or can we use these ideas in other areas of our lives too?
That's a great question, and I think it's one we should explore, because when you really think about it, the core principles of Love Sense, emotional responsiveness, vulnerability, repair, aren't those the ingredients for any healthy relationship? Whether it's with a partner, a friend, a family member, or even a colleague.
Wow. That's a really interesting thought. You're right. Those principles could apply to so many different relationships. That's something I'm definitely going to be thinking about. But before we get too sidetracked, let's bring it back to Love Sense and those who are looking for deeper connection in their romantic relationships. Any final thoughts for them before we wrap up our deep dive?
This has been such an interesting conversation
Yeah,
about Love Sense and all the revolutionary ideas Sue Johnson brings to the table.
it really has. It's
Yeah.
not every day you get to dive into the science behind love, which
Right.
can be kind of messy sometimes.
Right. And one thing that really stood out to me was how much Johnson emphasizes our early attachment experiences and how they shape our romantic relationships later in life. It's like we all have these blueprints for connection inside us, often without even realizing it.
That's fascinating. So you're saying those early bonds we form with our caregivers
Yeah.
actually set the stage for how we relate to our partners as adults.
Hmm.
Makes you wonder how much of our relationship patterns are actually choices we make versus just ingrained tendencies.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. Johnson argues that by understanding these patterns, we can start to make more conscious choices. It's not about blaming our past, it's about using that knowledge to create a better future.
I love that. It's like we're not doomed to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. We actually have the power to break free and build something new.
Right. And she gives us specific strategies for doing that. For example, she talks about becoming aware of our demon dialogues, those negative thought patterns that can really sabotage our relationships. You know, those inner voices that tell us we're not good enough, not lovable, not worthy of connection.
Oh, I know those voices all too well. They always seem to pop up at the worst times, especially when I'm feeling insecure.
Exactly. But Johnson gives us tools to challenge those voices, to replace them with more compassionate and supportive self-talk. She also talks about communicating our needs directly to our partner, without blaming or criticizing.
So it's about learning to ask for what we need in a way that brings us closer together
Yeah.
instead of pushing us apart.
You got it. It's about creating a safe space where both partners can express their needs and feel heard and understood. And I think that's really the heart of what Johnson is saying in Love Sense. Love isn't about finding the perfect person. It's about building a strong and loving connection with another imperfect human being.
And that takes work. It takes being intentional. And it takes showing up for each other, even when it's hard. It's not always romantic dinners and candlelight. Sometimes it's about navigating those tough conversations, repairing those little rifts, and making space for each other's vulnerabilities.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's about embracing all of it, the good and the bad, together.
Well, I feel incredibly inspired after diving into Love Sense. It's like Johnson has given us a whole new way to look at our relationship.
Me too. And I'm excited for our listeners to take these ideas and see how they can apply them to their own lives. Remember, you have the power to create the love you want.
So well said. And to all our amazing listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us on this journey. If you're intrigued by what we've talked about today, we highly recommend checking out Sue Johnson's Love Sense. It really will change how you think about love. And don't forget to subscribe to Mighty Habits. For more deep dives into fascinating topics like this one, we'll see you next time. And until then, keep those mighty habits flowing.